Thailand's Prime Minister has survived a key test to his leadership. The country's highest court has ruled Prayut Chan-o-cha is not guilty of a conflict of interest. The opposition had accused Mr Prayut of illegally overstaying in military housing, despite no longer being the army chief. Losing the case could have forced him out of the office. At the same time, anti-government protesters have returned to the streets. Live to May Wong in a moment, but first, Saksitsa Sombat explains today's ruling.
The acquittal of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha will surprise very few here in Thailand, as he's been found not guilty of any ethical breaches or any conflict of interest for staying in an army-provided house beyond his retirement as army chief. The accusation made by opposition politicians was that Mr Prayut shouldn't have stayed in the house provided by the military after he retired as army chief in 2014, a few months after he seized power in a military coup, and a few weeks after became prime minister for the first time. And it is especially since the state is still paying for its utility bills and that there's actually an official prime minister's residence. The 9 judges of Thailand's constitutional court, though, have rejected that argument. In fact, they took that accusation and turned it on its head, saying that exactly because Mr Prayut was an army chief and has thus done good deeds for the armed forces, those deeds entitle him to stay in a house provided by the army. That line of argument has also been previously applied to former army chiefs, including Prawit Wongsuwon and Anuphong Paujinda. These men are now Deputy Prime Minister and Interior Minister, respectively. Also, the court accepted the Prime Minister's defense that he needs to stay inside an army camp for security reasons and that the Prime Minister's residence is currently undergoing renovations, even though no one has lived there in over 30 years. Now, this will affect the government very little, as they can carry on like nothing has happened, but that doesn't mean it's smooth sailing from here on out. Anti-government protests that have been going on for months, they're continuing, and they will continue to call for the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and for vast political changes. And they will be even more angry after the verdict of the Constitutional Court that has toppled 3 prime ministers before, but as of the latest verdict, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha is not one of them. Saksitsa Sombat, CNA, Bangkok.
May Wong is at the protest site in Bangkok and she joins us now. So, May, not quite a surprise to the court ruling, but how have protesters been reacting?
No surprise whatsoever, but they've reacted with anger as well as huge disappointment. That's how they summed up their feeling towards this particular verdict. Initially, they held out hope against hope for a verdict to be against Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha because the court had deliberated this issue for months right now. So they had a sliver of hope, thinking that the judges could perhaps rule on the side of the people. Remember here that 9 constitutional judges unanimously decided that Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha did not flout any laws, and that's the reason why it made the people even more angry. They have gathered out here today, and I also want to show you how they have gathered out here as well. And this actually crowd that stretches almost 400 meters at least of the people turning up here. And remember, this is middle of the week, and so you don't expect that many people to actually come out. But clearly, the Constitutional Court judgment really brought the people out, not just because they're angry, but also because they're questioning the judicial system on whether or not it can be trusted in the future. I spoke to one of the protesters, and she pretty much summed up what many of them are feeling.
We think it's gonna be like this, but we just think, but we still hope. We still have a confidence, just a little bit, hope that it's gonna be justice. But now we don't trust the court anymore because it's not fair. What they do is not fair.
May we understand the protest leaders are saying that they will go all out. What do they mean by that? What are their plans?
Not just in terms of going all out in the number of protests that they will be holding, because they have already vowed to hold a protest almost on a daily or weekly basis. But more importantly, it's the messaging. Just one example of that is today. Look at that stage behind. It's pretty much set up to mimic the actual Constitutional Court. It only goes to show you they are making a mockery of the entire judicial system and also criticizing the constitutional judges. On that stage as well, the backdrop reads, kick out Prime Minister Prayut Chan-ocha. This has not changed. This is one of their key demands out of the three. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-ocha to quit, for the constitution to be changed completely, as well as to reform the monarchy. So aside from rallying more people to come out in droves, not just here in Bangkok but around the country, they will also be increasing the intensity of their messaging, becoming more critical of the monarchy as well as of the administration. Remember here that the lèse majesté law is very much in place. At least 10 protest leaders have already been slapped with the lèse majesté law that can imprison them for up to 15 years per charge. And right now as well, with the Constitutional Court judgment, the court has warned the people that they can be held in contempt of court if they were to criticize the judgment, as well as to use expletives to describe the judgment. But all these people here not worrying about that, and they will continue to push forward, and we will have to see whether or not the authorities will crack down on the protesters.